You and I have touched the side of Jesus. We have put our fingers into the nail prints on his hands and feet. When, we ask, have we done this? We have done this when we have overcome our fears, our insecurities, our doubts, our hesitations, our inhibitions, and finally come to accept and to believe that Jesus is the Christ, he is the Son of the living God. He truly has for us given mercy and rendered mercy so that we may truly be one with him. It begins with our internal acceptance of God's very deep care and very deep love for each of us. Then as we are on a journey, it oftentimes is influenced, significantly influenced by the example, by the presence, by the friendship and companion of another. During the call of the elect and the welcome of those converting to Catholicism at the cathedral, a young, attractive woman, I would say in her early 20s, introduced her grandmother to me. She very overtly said, "She is the reason I am here today. It is her witness, her love, her special care for me that has been the magnetic force that has brought me to this moment. She is God's agent. She is here to really be of service to me." The introduction that this young woman was a direct, life-changing relationship with Jesus, because through her grandmother, she had finally been in touch with the absolute longing of her heart. And her grandmother was that agent. She was the one through whom God worked in order to bring this beautiful young woman into relationship with him. And what she has come to recognize, she told me, is that through her cross, through the cross of Jesus, has been a remarkable personal gift to herself. That eventually she actually experienced this love as it was demonstrated to her eventually and fulfilled in a way that was of a climbing momentum in the sacrament of reconciliation. When she recognized and experienced sacramentally that her sins were forgiven, that God's action was explicitly and very beautifully directed toward her. At this moment, she really felt that she had put her hand in his side, that she had put her fingers in the nail prints in his hands and in his feet. And then as she welled up with that great emotion of what happened to her, like Thomas, she could experience deeply within herself the eruption of my Lord and my God, as she truly recognized the experience and action of God on her behalf, that she indeed did not need to have the physical presence of Jesus. She was overcome by his spiritual presence and all that he brought in a very positive way. But then imbued and nearly overwhelmed by God's own life, she recognized that she in turn now is called in the way of her grandmother. And the instruction of Jesus that he imparted to his apostles on that day when he acknowledged the forgiveness of sins to them now was entrusted to her. Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, now I send you. And she was the beneficiary of the very breath of God, God who now breathes on all of us as we accept him, as we believe him, as we allow him to penetrate the very depths of our hearts. At this point, the power of Jesus was transformation. And it was transferred from him to them. And that life-giving breath, which is then in turn imparted to all of us, became the great gift that has been from that day on transferred down the line of all of us who believe that we have the very energy and breath and lifeline of God himself. And so those who fall within the shadow of Peter were cured of their sickness and unclean spirit. And so it is that we too now, because we have inherited that gift that was rendered to Peter, also find that through our presence, through the gift of ourselves, that we are very much a part of God's mercy, that we represent and live the very life of God within us, so that those who are called and unfortunate, in a sense, to fall within our shadow, hopefully will also experience not necessarily the healing of the body, but certainly the healing of the soul, the spirit that makes so much difference, and which in the end is that which totally counts, that which will go on forever, is truly immortal. And we say, how do we do this? How do we bring about the spirit of Peter? How do we cast our shadow? How do we bring life to others? The very first, of course, I think, is that you and I are called to have mercy on others in a very normal human way. It's not always so easy, because we find people oftentimes whom we feel have tried to hurt us, that have been very effective in making us feel very hostile and very negative toward them. I can think of an example in my own life. I had an uncle who was a Jesuit priest, and he worked at the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Center in Rapid City on behalf of the Native American people there. And one evening, after a bingo game of all things, he and his associate priest brought in the proceeds and were going to leave them there overnight until they could be counted the next morning and put in the bank for the benefit of the mission. Two Native Americans, young American Indians, who were quite inebriated, broke in. And they wanted to put their hands on that money. But in the meanwhile, they became very, very hostile and difficult. On the one hand, the poor Jesuit, the older Jesuit who was with my uncle, died of fright. And they pointed their gun and said, we can shoot you in one place where you might live, and the other place where you will die. What's your choice? He said, I choose to live. That's where they shot him. And eventually they were convicted, put in jail, and all that sort of thing. But then they asked for clemency. And as one of his relatives and close to me, they asked me to petition on their behalf for clemency. But it was hard. You think that as Christians we would respond immediately. Oh yes, forgive that person, move on. But one who wants to take the very life breath out of ourselves, of one who is so precious and so important to us, we say, let me step back and think about it. We're not so very fast in rendering mercy. Ultimately, I found the gumption to do so. It's probably through the inspiration of God himself. But the first call for us is then to say, yes, how hard it must have been for God to render mercy to all of us when we have gone far beyond what we do to one another. But so he has. And our belief is really rendered if indeed then we choose to have mercy on others. And there is the second feature in which we experience and then are called, as Jesus has breathed upon us, that in turn we are called to witness, encourage, and see others as recipients of God's goodness and God's mercy. And so like the grandmother to the young woman, we are to take upon ourselves the opportunity to befriend them, to witness, to speak of God's love, and to set off a reaction in others, whereby a chain reaction where they experience and understand too what God has done for them. And Pope Francis points up, especially in his homily on the occasion of his inauguration as Pope, that in this reaching out, that one of the protections that we offer of God's care is to be tender, to be caring, to be understanding, not to be judgmental or overwhelming in people because they have already judged themselves and oftentimes are unwilling to let go of that judgment in order to experience God's mercy. So his advice is, as we exercise the agency of mercy on his behalf and introduce others to that mercy, he says to do so kind-heartedly, to be able to look into the eyes of another and through your own compassion and understanding, communicate mercy and love and acceptance and the embrace of God, because that is going to communicate through you to them the very agency of God's mercy. And through a gradual introduction, then, we help them to understand what Jesus did. That is, that he has personalized this invitation, and that our eyes become his eyes, our heart becomes his heart, and people are introduced to the concern and mercy that he brings to them. And so on this journey, which leads to conscious forgiveness of sins and the complete healing of the other, especially through the explicit sign of reconciliation, of confession, of sacrament of penance, we recognize that it is a journey, that it is a movement, that we do appreciate, obviously, the great gift of our sacraments themselves, but they are the apex. They are the final moment when we experience God's mercy. But we have been incorporated into that reality all along, and that incorporation has come through those who really care for us, those who are willing to forgive, to understand, to lead, to spend their time, to let know through the gift of themselves that God truly cares for the other, that they are worthy of his mercy, that they are called in the embrace of love. They are called to experience the very breath of God himself.